people have always been interested in the paranormal. They've always wanted to put a face into the things that they were unable to explain. Even more so in a time when fairies, ghosts and witches walked the earth in the stories handed down from grandmother to granddaughter. Here are 5 paranormal stories from 17th century Britain. Number 5. Jeffries and the Fairies. The year was 1645. The 19-year-old servant girl Anne Jeffries was working for a Cornish family called the Pitts. One morning, Anne had claimed that she had seen no less than 6 fairies in the garden of her master. She was so incredibly scared by this encounter that the poor girl collapsed. Her health suffered due to the trauma, and months after the event, she would suffer from fits and rendered her weak and unable to stand. But the weird encounter Anne had in the garden was not all bad. The girl seemed to have developed healing powers. Anne Jeffries and her healing touch were known all over England. She would say the fairies were always with her and would not leave her sight. Anne said she had received her powers through the fairies feeding her fairy food. But not everyone took kind to Anne and her healing touch. In a time and age where the unknown and the paranormal was also seen as a work of darkness, it was not long before the magistrates and the local authorities came to hear of this special girl with her fairies. The magistrates said the fairies were a creation of the devil and decided to lock Anne up in jail. Eventually, since there was no hard evidence, Anne was released and lived out her life together with her husband. Number 4. The Poltergeist of Isabel Heriot. Ormiston, Scotland. For several years now, the young Isabel Heriot had been in the service of a local minister. She was believed to have been a good and hard worker, but nevertheless, the minister fired the girl because she had little to no interest in religion. Because she was fired, she was unable to find a home, nor work or food. In the hard and cold winter of 1680, the poor girl froze to death. Not long after, she was found dead on the streets of Ormiston. It was believed that her ghost was seen near the minister's house. The local people told the minister, but he touched the little cross around his neck and told the people there was no such thing as ghosts. But then the minister's home was pelted with stones that seemed to come out of nowhere. The attacks on the minister and his home occurred over a period of no less than 8 or 9 weeks, damaging the house and even hitting the minister's other servants. Apart from the weird stones, it also seemed as if things in the house were moved, while strange noises and voices could be heard throughout the corridors. Just before the poltergeist activity stopped, the ghost of Heriot was seen for a second and final time. It was the same woman that saw her the first time. She said the ghost of the girl was in the backyard of the minister, and that she was collecting rocks, and that the devil had asked her to destroy her old master. Number 3. The Doppelganger of Mary Joffe. When Mary Joffe lay on her deathbed at the house of her father in the Kent town of Westmalling on June the 3rd of 1691, she begged her husband to prepare a horse. It came to be that her children were staying in the town of Rochester, some 9 miles away. She wanted to be with her children one last time before she died, but as it stood, Joffe was too weak to even get out of bed, so her husband did not call to prepare a horse for a trip to Rochester. Mary stopped breathing and entered what only could be described as a trance-like state just after 1 a.m. Around the same time, the nurse of the children in Rochester was more than surprised to see Mary come out of the bedroom of one of the eldest daughters. For what seemed to be a good 15 minutes, Joffe stood at the nurse's bedside where her youngest daughter slept as well. Goffe recovered from a trance-like state right after the clock had struck 2, and told her mother that she went to visit her children in Rochester while she was sleeping. After this, she died. The next morning, the nurse reported the strange goings-on to the neighbours, who would later confirm the story. Number 2. The Demon of Spreyton. On a crisp November day in 1682, a manservant called Francis Fay saw the dead father of his master walking through a field in the English village of Spreyton. It seemed that the ghost wanted Fay to carry out some of the unfinished business that was taken up in the man's will. The good boy accepted, and after finishing the business, he went back home. The next day, he would encounter the ghost of his master's dead stepmother. The ghost, later on known as the Demon of Spreyton, threw him off his horse. Even more, it was believed to be hell-bent on making the poor fellow's life a living hell. The demon tried to choke Fay with his own handkerchief, so he ripped up his wigs. One time, the demon made Fay's shoelaces come to life, or threw the man himself up in the air. In another, rather gruesome episode, the demon had sent out a bird to attack him. The bird was carrying a big stone in its beak with which it tried to bash Fay's head in. Number 1. The Ghost of Anne Walker. In Lumley, England, there lived a rich widower called William Walker. Because he was without wife and he needed someone to run the house, he made up his mind to hire a relative by the name of Anne as his housekeeper. The two of them grew very close, and after Anne became pregnant, the town knew who the father was. In March of 1632, William had decided it was best to send Anne away until the storm the scandal had caused calmed down. It was believed that Anne first stayed at the house of one of his aunts, but was later moved to the city of Durham. It was quite some time before anyone heard anything of Anne, but then she suddenly appeared before a miller in Lumley, going by the name of James Graham. She was soaked and covered in blood. Anne's ghost told the miller that William did not indeed move her to an aunt's house, but that he had hired a man by the name of Sharp to murder her. She told him that Sharp had killed her with a heavy pickaxe and had dumped her in one of the water pools in the mine. And before she vanished into thin air, the girl asked the miller to tell the authorities about what happened to her. But Graham, scared of what might happen to him if he did, was scared and reluctant to actually go to the authorities. But then Anne appeared before him again, swearing that she would haunt him for the rest of his life if he didn't. The body of the poor girl was found exactly where her ghost said it would be, and when arrested, Sharp declared that he did indeed kill the girl. He and Walker hung in August that year. So, these were 5 paranormal stories from 17th century Britain. Next week, we are going to have a look at the top 5 most gruesome things hidden under the streets of London. Give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed watching, and do not forget to subscribe. Stay safe. See you next week.